We'll call this meeting to order. My name is Joe McGivern, Chairman of the City of Holyoke's City Council's Finance Committee. To my left is Councilor Jim Leahy. To my right, Peter Tallman. To Peter's right is Mike Sullivan. We make up the committee. We have one missing member this evening, Councilor McGee, also our president, who is stuck right now at work, but he does believe he should be able to make it before we get to the end of this short agenda. Joining us from city councilors is way over to my right here, Linda Vacan from Ward 5. Over to my left, Dave Bartley from Ward 3. And we welcome our new Ward 2 city councilor, not new to these chambers, but Terrence Murphy. Thank you, Terry, for coming in. We do have a good agenda ahead of us, but I think we're ready to tackle it. Unfortunately, the mayor just texted me and stated he will not be able to join us this evening. He's under the weather, and he will catch up to any questions that we have from the mayor's office. The chair will entertain a motion for if we could do items 1 and 3 together.
Motion to take items number 1 and 3 as a package.
Is it the firefighters?
Yes.
Okay, yep.
Motion is made and seconded to take up items number 1 and 3 together as a package. Item 1 is in the fiscal, an appropriation in the fiscal year 2019 for the free cash amount of $403,804.41 to be utilized to ratify a recent arbitrated contract for the firefighters local. And this money would be used for the salary increases for this fiscal year, which would include the captains $36,079.27, lieutenants $66,180.22, firefighters $280,059.87, supervisors fire alarm $3,709.53, assistant supervisor fire alarm $3,312.17, and the fire alarm operator $14,463.35. Total $403,804.41. That's item number 1. Item number 3 is a copy of the agreement. We're taking that up for discussion purposes this evening. Just real quick, both for people who are present, but more so for any of our listening audience, we are on television. The City Council cannot and does not negotiate contracts. What we do is we have the responsibility of the appropriation to pay for a contract. Typically that works in 2 fashions. The contract sometimes is multiple years, sometimes as this one with retroactive monies that are due. We have to be assured that for this fiscal year that the money in this appropriation will cover the fiscal year. Also any retroactive money that will be coming towards the firefighters. We also have the responsibility of where the money is coming from and making a determination if we agree with the mayor. The mayor is the only person within the government of the city of Holyoke who can initiate an appropriation. We cannot amend or change any appropriation. We can only vote it up or down. But if we were to agree that this appropriation covers the rest of this fiscal year and the retroactive money for the contract, then that would be our responsibility to adopt it, which would ratify the contract. Contract is subject to the appropriation process itself. Being that, as it is, we do and always are interested in the particulars of any contract, and we're also interested and will ask questions about future year appropriations or impacts on the budget itself. Although they won't be in this budget, we certainly need to know what it means in terms of dollars for future years. With that in mind, I would ask the law department if they could just run through us the agreement, highlighting anything that you see, and then we can get into a question and answer period. We have a number of local firefighters with us, including the president of the local, and we certainly will entertain any discussion and entertain questions from city councilors. You have a mic over there, Tasha? Okay, you all right?
Is the green light on?
Oh.
There you go.
I'm on.
Okay. Tasha, could you give us your full name and just explain your role with this contract and the law department in the city?
Absolutely. Tasha Marshall, Assistant City Solicitor in the Law Department. With this contract has been negotiated for almost 3 years now. It's been negotiated since 2016. I've been sitting in on negotiations for the last 6 months since I've been with the city. A few highlights of this contract is this will be a 5-year contract. It will be effective from July 1st of 2016 and then end on June 30th of 2021. This contract was signed on November 2nd of 2018, and the city does thank our first responders for being patient with us and getting this contract to the Finance Committee today. A few things, as you can see from the first page, are the wages increases. The wages increases are minor. From 2017, there's 1.5%. January 1st, 2018 is 1.5%, July 1st, 2018 is 1%, and then effective of January 1st of this year, it will be a 1% raise. So once this contract is approved, there will be back pay that will go to our first responders. Other major changes in the contract is our residency requirement. Before, there was no residency requirement in the contract, but now it will require the firefighters to live in the city or within 15 miles of the city. Were there any other specific questions about any?
Sorry, if you could address, it's here, but just addressed on record the longevity changes and how that works. On page 3.
Yeah. So with the longevity changes, let's see, sorry. It will increase the longevity 10 years to $800, 15 years to $900, so on and so forth. Would you like me to read what the original, what it states in the original contract?
Sure.
So this will be paragraph 14.01 in the original contract. In the manner and to the extent provided in this article, each employee who has actually and continuously worked for the city for the accumulated periods of time as provided in this paragraph shall receive annual longevity pay in accordance with the schedule. So each year, a firefighter who would fall within one of these categories, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, will, in addition to his or her salary, will receive the longevity pay.
And one of the changes is we went from a flat rate to a percentage of the base salary.
Yes.
And was that at the request of the union?
Yes, that was prior to me coming into the negotiations, but I was told that that was at the request of the union.
Okay, and just I'll just read quickly. What was the former for years of service flat rate became for 10 years 1.5% of the base salary, for 15 years 1.75%, for 20 years 2% of the base salary, for 25 years 3% of the base salary, and 30 years it's 3,100 or 4% of the base salary, whichever is greater. And that is a difference. We did discuss last June when we had our initial go around with an agreement, some of the pluses and minuses of being a percentage. And it sounds like, well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but thank you. Is there any questions on the contract? I want to have our auditors here this evening to discuss the appropriation and what it covers. Is there any questions as far as the language goes or as far as the increases goes? Okay. Tanya, would you care to join us? Wherever you feel comfortable.
Just put, yep, there you go.
You have a question for me?
Yeah, the transfer this evening, the appropriation is coming from free cash. I think we understand the significance of that. Free cash has only recently been certified. I believe this is the first free cash appropriation since it was certified. So the amount is, you know, this, what we certified it at was 700,000.
Actually, I have that right here. It was, there's actually two
Correct.
certifications, but together, together it was 1,349,948, but we cured deficits with 775, which left us
Yeah, 1,000?
1 million?
1 million.
Oh.
I'm sorry, 1,349,000.
Got a little nervous there. Really,
I
a
would
lot
have been
nervous.
really nervous too, sorry. It's just, you know, we left off a couple decimal places here. 775,000 we cured deficits with, and we had 574,900 available at the beginning.
574,900?
Correct.
This is before the 400,000, or is this including that?
After the 403, we'll have 171,900. 171,900.
I'm sorry, Joe, I'm taking over.
No,
I'm just saying historically, I mean, you haven't been here, but I'm sure you can look at the trends of the numbers. Historically, where normally are we at as of February or the end of January?
In all honesty, I'm not sure. I've only been here 2 months, so it's
Yeah,
like.
no, I know. That's
Okay.
why I prefaced. Joe, do you know historically?
Recent time, we're usually between $1 million and $2 million.
Yeah.
In more historical time, Terry can tell you, we used to be between 5 and 7 million when we started.
Wow. Thank you.
Tanya, you and I talked today, I think, and you heard my opening remarks. If we could just let people know, both with what the fire department has told us, who have calculated the pay, and with your help, that this amount will cover until the end of the fiscal year the salaries of captains, lieutenants, firefighters, alarm division, and so on.
This is just for the raises itself,
Okay, but
just for the contract.
it's the raises, but that would include retroactive
Retroactive and the current raise for the current fiscal year.
for this fiscal year.
My assumption would be that the rest of it would probably be covered besides the longevity that we spoke about, but that doesn't change until next year.
I learned something about the longevity, and I just looked at it, and the longevity won't kick in until the next budget.
Yeah, I saw
So
that after.
as far as our ratification vote, we need to be aware of that, but we do not, in terms of this transfer, it does not have anything to do with it this year. The longevity, if I haven't said it on record, calculations by percentage have not been, and they'll have to be calculated annual because it'll be with the individual makeup and seniority of the firefighters that would be currently employed each year. It'll be calculated in terms of what the mayor has to budget for, and certainly we will be aware of that when the budget comes in June. Is there any questions for the auditor? Okay. All right, and would the president of the firefighters like to address the body?
I do have an editorial at the end. Okay. Or,
We'll just hit the button and make sure it's green.
Good evening.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. You gonna ask a question, or you want me to just go over some couple things first?
Anything, Will, if you want to make it, your negotiation with the city is come to a fruition here, and we just need to,
I believe we went back to after last June's incident and went back to the city. We had one meeting with the city, with the previous solicitor, Didn't go well, so we, as a union, we filed for the JLMC process, the Joint Labor Management Committee. They are pretty much the mediators for any bargaining impasse. We had 2 sessions with JLMC and the city with the JLMC mediating in between. After the second session, we came to agreement, what you see in front of you today. So that went on throughout the fall, and then I just want to correct one thing we were discussing. We did, this previous lawyer offered a percentage base, and it was offered again with the percentage base longevity.
Can I ask him a question on that?
Sure, Councilor Leahy, if you can.
It's not so much a question. It's more of an editorial. I'm looking down at this. If a firefighter lasts 15, 20, 25 years, 30 years, I think, for lack of better words, damn right, they're well worth $3,100. I mean, we all know what difficult jobs you guys have, public safety. I don't think any of you guys or anybody at home doesn't know that's my whole quality of life issues are public safety. I want to make sure that all the residents are protected. And if a firefighter lasts that long, 30 years, I don't see any problems with that percentage. I know it kind of jumps out of the page for certain people because that's not what we're used to seeing. However, I have zero problem with that.
Yeah, and the percentage doesn't kick into fiscal 20.
Yeah.
The only thing that with the longevity was the $100 that she spoke of for the first 3 years.
Can you also address? And I'm in favor. I'm in favor of everything. As I spoke to Eddie earlier, I think the city. I wish they acted a lot faster. I wish you guys didn't have to go to mediation twice. I wish this didn't have to go on for 3 years. I just don't think that's in the best interest of you. I say you, everyone, and the wives and the husbands that are sitting at home and the children. It's a very difficult thing. One thing that pops out at me, and I think it's a good thing, it's clothing allowance. It's going up from $1,140 to $1,400, and so that's a positive thing. Does the city make you buy your clothing in certain places?
Yeah, well, they don't make us go to certain places. There's only pretty much 2 places that sell the type of uniforms. They do. The clothing went out for many reasons. I don't know if you guys done the history of the carcinogens and stuff like that.
Yes.
Guys are taking extra precaution. The city gives us gear. They give us, I don't want to say bare minimum in a bad way, but they give us equipment. But guys like to go a little extra with more gear to protect themselves from the cancers and the carcinogens and stuff with hoods, gloves, just equipment, personal equipment that the city doesn't provide. But we're not asking the city to provide personal equipment for us.
Oh, I remember. I took an asbestos abatement course when I was in college, and doing the history of that, it wasn't men and women, or mostly men, taking away the asbestos. It was the wives who were doing the laundry at night. They were the ones who were coming down with it. Another interesting thing is the military days. You're going from 17 to 22.
Yes.
I'd like to see that number even higher. I mean, people are protecting and serving our country, and they have to be worried on their 20th day, 21st day. If I was on the other side of the table with you guys, I would have been.
It's a little different. If a military member has active, if he gets his papers to go, he gets to go. He's not going to get penalized for leaving and protecting our country. Those are like the reservists, stuff like that. 2 weeks a year, I believe, a week and a month.
So what's the average then? Is that fine then?
Some have gone over 17. Some actually have to deploy for a month. We actually have one now that's in training for his unit.
All right, so it's not common then?
No, it's not like if he went overseas. No, that they have to give him the time off for that. I believe we just...
Item number 13, this is something I get every year. I get a flu shot, and I'm glad it's put in this contract. I hope it's in the contract for all the city employees. What's the percentage ballpark? I know you don't have the employees or the firemen and women.
I'm not sure the number. At least half the guys use that flu shot. I know the older firefighters use it.
Well, because I'm just going to say that's going to help us, the city. Yeah. If they get the flu shot and hopefully it's the right strain and that sort of thing, you're going to have less sick time.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm interested in this. But that's kind of just my editorial. I'm supporting this.
Thank you.
I'm happy you guys finally have something in writing. Thank you.
I think the only other financial impact we haven't discussed, but I think it's pretty cut and dry, is item number 7, which is the reimbursement of EMS fees. There's an increase there, which makes sense, but...
So basically, pretty much every firefighter every firefighter gets hired now has to be an EMT since '96. This was just a little help for those guys. We have to take a DOT course every 2 years, and as part of our certification to maintain it, we run a Class 5 ambulance now with our engines. So it just helps with the training and our care for the people.
Is EMS a typo, or is that stand?
EMS, Emergency Medical Service.
Service, okay.
Yep.
I think we're all aware of that, but that is a financial impact, but I think it falls within line. On longevity, there is $79,000 that is budgeted for this year. I think, because it's not changing this year, I think there's plenty to cover the base stipend that you talked about. I said it in June, I'll say it now. There's nothing I can do about it, or nothing we can do about it is, although I agree with what Councilor Leahy said, I disagree with percentages. I think it's going to be a nightmare down the road, and I'm surprised that my understanding is that the city asked for the percentage and not the, I actually congratulated you guys when I saw it in June.
We were pretty much matching the police. Actually, the police a little more percentage, but we were matching the police with it.
It just, over the years, percentages, can work both ways. When there's a younger department, it works in favor of the city. When there's an older department, it works in favor of, as Jimmy said, the person. Although I'm not sure I would have said it the way you said it. I mean, we want to see all our firefighters to make that 25 years.
Absolutely, but this is a difficult job. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, making 30 years.
Not many
as a
30-year-old firefighters anymore.
God bless you guys all.
We're lucky we get 25 years out of these guys, to be honest with you.
I saw Paul Gabala last night, and the knees are hurting. They're knacking. Okay. Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, could I just have the auditor a second? Because I had to step out. I have my elderly parents in Florida, so I had to take a call from them. Tanya, did they ask you about the impact on this for FY20? Do we know? Because it's not budget. We're taking this out of free cash for right now. So what's the impact of this contract on fiscal year 20?
I'm actually just sending out that budget information, and I'm working with the solicitor's office to make sure that people are aware of the outlines of all the contracts in the city, so that they're aware of the raises that they get, step raises that they get, clothing allowance, any type of buybacks. So I don't have a dollar figure, but I will shortly. As soon as the budgets are due, we'll be able to take a good look at it to see what the increase actually is.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, the free cash transfer for this is what now?
$403,804.41.
Okay, so I'll make a guess. That'll be somewhere around $1 million.
This includes a retro, though.
Right. I'm making the guess because you don't have a number, so I said it's a guess.
Okay.
So. All right. Gentlemen, thanks for coming here as always. So hypothetically, we got to think about the budget. You know this city's broke. You know that. So we just had a tax increase and a major sewer fund increase. So thinking about those things going forward, I've got to make one plea, and then I'm going to ask one question straight up. One plea is the overtime situation. We actually had a sergeant in here from the police department about a month ago, said, and I quote, "We gave you guys back $350,000 2 fiscal years ago. We gave you guys back." That was exact quote. So when we think about the budget, the contract, as the chairman rightly noted, we're just that's the way the system is. We just, pretty much, other than that, whatever happened last year, and that is our situation in city council, but we don't have to revisit that for right now. But generally, we're just going to go ahead and approve it because we want you to have great success. But we have to be stewards of the city finances, just as all city departments, but the 3 major departments, fire, police, public works, just have to be aware of what happens with the budget. And I don't know why the chief isn't here, but And I don't know if there's any superior officers here. I don't see any here right now, but you just have to be aware of it going forward, because when it comes to the budget time next year, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to try to make a motion to probably cut down the overtime budget and see if we can just do it as a little by little type of a situation. If we have to make a free cash transfer because we have a small overtime budget, then so be it. But to have large overtime budgets, as we've seen in the past, in May and June, they just become evaporated for some reason. I don't know why that happens, but it happens. But I'm just making a plea that we can all work together as a team and try to curtail that to the extent that we possibly can. Now, if the unthinkable happens, which we came within, so as you know, the free cash situation is under $200,000 for right now. That could theoretically happen, or I mean, I think last year we limped to the finish line with about $25,000 in free cash. So the days of 8 million, 9 million, 10 million, way before me, I think they're pretty well gone. And as you know, we have a bond issue before us for $8.9 million. As you also know, we passed here for $2.5 million for the fire department last June. I did not vote for that. I voted for half of it, but I didn't vote for the whole thing, but I didn't win that one. I lost that one. So that was another $2.5 million in bonds. And as you also know, we're going to have before us a potential vote for $55 million for the school department. So at some point, we're going to ask the auditor, the impact of all this debt service that's going to be happen on the budget. So what would happen hypothetically if we got to the point where we couldn't sustain it? So we have no more free cash. What happens then? So we get to somewhere in the halfway through the fiscal year, and without an override, as your council, or has anybody thought about that? As a union, have you considered that in union meetings? What happens if the city's budget is just unable to support the contracts? Have those conversations ever happened?
Yeah, we have many conversations about budget with the chief, or I do. I think the fire department has been very good about being budget conscious. I believe our overtime cut over $400,000 every year, and I think the chief's been sustaining around $350 to $450 every year. Nowhere in the city is like that. I know we've touched $800,000, but that was due to lack of staffing. We're up on staffing. We've closed an engine. I think the fire department's gone above and beyond to save the city money. I appreciate everything you guys do. I appreciate the new fire trucks. We all do, but at the same time, I mean, safety comes in a factor. We're driving around a 1978 fire truck ladder that's not rated for what's today's firefighting tactics. But I think if you look back, I'm going back 4 years, and I think the chief has not come back in here and asked for money. Even when the city, when we had a tragedy and we needed an engine, and we worked around it, we're beyond it now. But I think we did well. Maybe,
So that's
without seeing the numbers, I think we average about $350,000 a year in overtime.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to ask a couple more things. So that's so just on a point you raised, so that brownout is, am I using the right term?
It's not a brownout anymore. It's closed.
It's closed.
It's closed.
Okay, so to not be revisited until something else happens.
Yes, but I don't think that's ever going to be revisited.
Okay, so closed. Stations 3 and 6. So I saw that memo.
Okay.
And what is the fire department's position on those stations right now? In other words, are they going to have to be rehabilitated? Are they going to be closed and new ones open? Or
I don't think they need to be closed, personally. They're old. I think Station 6, 1962. Station 3 is 1968. One has a boiler that's probably running 40% efficient. There's no maintenance done to the building at all. Basic maintenance. Station 3's got mold, lead, chips flying all over the place, asbestos, inefficient heating, windows that leak water, sewer backups occasionally. It's just major stuff, and that falls on the DPW. I understand it's another money, but lack of maintenance in the building. If you have a general maintenance plan or something, maybe this stuff wouldn't happen. You change a window once every 5 years. You don't expect the windows to work from 1968 to 2019. I mean, if you go there on a breezy day or a rainy day, you'll see the water come in, air come in. I understand the city's has a budget to run, but we're trying the best we can, Band-Aiding the state. The guys chip in around the firemen chip in to make repairs. We got tradesmen, we all tradesmen. We chip in and make repairs, no cost to the city. The chief gives us the okay, just to help out. We do a lot to help out to save the city money. Without getting into details, I mean, if you sit down, have a meeting with Chief Pond, I'm sure you could explain better, more. But with those two buildings, they're just inefficient.
Well, how about this? How about you and Chief Pond and Mr. McManus sit down, have a meeting?
Oh, there's been numerous meetings between
Numerous
the commission,
meetings, okay.
the commissioners, the station's conditions has been, see, I've been a president for a year now, and we've been discussing it, so at least a year with McManus and all that. So I believe something, you said that they're trying for a bond for that, or something's going on. I don't know if somebody's writing a grant, if Deputy Chief Preswickowski's going to write a grant to help out, offset some of the costs, you know. So I don't know where that is. I mean, Chief will know more where they're at about with what stuff's going to cost now at this point.
All right, well, that's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. First of all, I know there have been increase in firefighters in the last year and a half, thereabouts. Do you know from the beginning of the contract in 2016 to now what the increase is in terms of number of firefighters, particularly?
We were budgeted, I believe, for 72, and we were to have 10 on the SAFER grant. We haven't had an increase. That was maintain our status of 82 firefighters. I believe 21 lieutenants, 12 captains, and 6 deputies. And we've maintained that. That's what helped with the overtime. We took the extra firefighters and placed them in vacant spots when we closed Engine 2. The staffing, we're a little down now with we've had a couple of retirees, guys that left due to injury, so we're down a little bit. But yes, we were maintaining staff levels, yes.
So just based, and I had done I asked the chief to give me some statistics a year ago before I ever thought about doing this again. And at that point, most of the apparatus operated with 3 people.
We don't go below 3.
I think only 2 operated with 4 on a regular basis.
With the new plan the chief put forward when he closed Engine 2, Engine 5 runs with 4 but one of the trucks try to maintain 4, but sometimes we got to bounce
to go to another
to maintain minimum 3 staffing on the rest of the engines throughout the city or the other ladder truck. So we never go below 3.
Okay. No, I realize that. Yeah. But the fact that you are at 3 in many cases, if one of those people is out, requires either someone to be shifted from one that has 4 or for someone to be brought into overtime. And I've often thought that if we're spending $350,000 in overtime, is that we indicate somewhere around there?
I think that's an average without seeing the budget.
You know, if we had 3 or 4 different firefighters available on a shift that could fit in and go wherever it's needed without being an overtime shift, but a regular shift, and that might cost us $200,000, would we in effect save money and have better fire protection?
Well, yeah, more personnel. You're gonna if we're at more personnel, yes, we will save money, and the safety of firefighters in the city would help.
Okay. Yeah. And one last comment, and I think I heard you correctly. There is clothing equipment that would be providing maximum safety for the firefighters from the environmental hazards that you incur. And the city is having you pick up some of that rather than a city?
No, the city buys us the hood, turnout gear, basic equipment. Guys like to take the extra step. The big thing now is having multiple set of gloves, hoods, anything that's attached to our uniforms. They like to have 2 or 3 sets in their locker. And so Uniforms are paid through our clothing. We buy them out of our clothing. Safety equipment, city do provide us with structural fire boots, gear, hood stuff. But like I said, some guys like to have an extra 2 hoods or a special hood, better hoods, the more expensive hoods. Gloves, they like to carry 3 sets of gloves. That's it. And
So in some cases, they're just adding.
they're just adding to their gear.
Gotten.
Yep, yes.
But are there cases where the city is taking the least quality at the lesser cost in order to save money? And that, I mean,
I don't know if they're cutting corners. We got good gear. I can't complain. We got some good gear. In general, gear is very expensive. I mean, just the turnout gear without the helmet, I think it's $1,000 for one individual, and the helmet's about $500. So our goal is to get 2 sets of gears for every firefighters, just for safety. And I could explain that another time, but the city does provide. They don't cheap on our gear. Like they're not buying the lower end stuff. Okay. All
right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Reagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question isn't on the economics, because I know that you worked that out with the arbitrator and all. And I think Councilor Bartley covered future concerns about our budget, but that's going to be for everybody all throughout the city. The issue that I have a question about is the residency, which I heard that you said in the contract now there is a residency requirement except for 15 miles outside the city. And I thought I heard you say that there had not been a residency requirement before, but I wasn't sure if I understood you correctly.
I haven't spoke of the residency yet, but what we did, we took the civil service standard. I think she said we added the residency. There wasn't one previous. We added the city limit mileage, what it states in civil service.
So I was just trying to understand the context of that, because we have a city ordinance that requires that firefighters live within the city, which was reaffirmed and clarified within the last 5 years. So I guess my question is, was that ordinance considered when the residency language was added to the contract? And then my final question relative to the residency will be, what rules? A city ordinance, the state law, or the contract? Because what I've been led to understand over the last number of years is that city ordinances would rule over a contractual agreement. And there may be disagreement on what it should be. But I was wondering if in that discussion, and I understand the references that you're giving, if the local ordinance was acknowledged and understood by the people doing the contract.
Yeah, I think your ordinance, and we found it, you changed the ordinance for non-union employees back August 2nd of 2016. But that being said, Chapter 41, Mass General Law, collective bargaining trumps ordinance, state law trumps collective bargaining. And I believe it's in 150E2, and I forget what section J, I believe. If there is a negotiation in good faith that we did, which I don't know when it was negotiated out. This one was a little stricter than our last one. Our last one just said reasonable distance away. And so, yeah, Section 7 of 150E is the other one that states that collective bargaining trumps ordinance, or if we negotiate it out.
So can you tell me that section again?
150E, Section 7. And then, I believe.
So the understanding is if there's a local law that a contract can be negotiated that ignores the law? That's what this section 150E says?
I don't know if an ordinance is considered a law versus Mass General Law. I know ordinance, you got city ordinance, and then you got the general state of Massachusetts law.
Correct. And sometimes we make our local ordinances stricter than the state law, we can't make them generally less than the state law. And so this, 3 to 4 years ago, we tightened up the residency language in our ordinances because there was vagueness within it around this. So I think we still have a question on that through the chair, and I would just like us to come at least to a clear understanding within the city that if we pass an ordinance, can the ordinance simply be set aside by a contractual agreement that is negotiated outside of the ordinance? I think we need to have an answer to that in the city, because I mean, this could come up in any number of venues over any number of ordinances. And if we go through all the public process of creating ordinances, which are local laws, an ordinance is a local law, separate from the state law. I think we need to be clear about whether our ordinances matter or if they are subject to contractual negotiations that the council can't participate in. So do you think, Mr. Chairman, as a point of information that we need to have a separate order filed to understand that?
I think what you're requesting is a legal opinion, which I understand, and I think we can request that this evening if we could, Crystal, on the residency issue.
Am I being clear enough about what my question is?
Yes.
Thank you.
And, I mean, I'm not a big residency person, as you know, but I do believe that, you know, ordinances are important, but we can adopt ordinances. We have ordinances that say how many firefighters there are, and the mayor can stay within that ordinance subject to appropriation. And we actually, the Board of Aldermen actually got sued once. I think it was the fire department too, Chair, wasn't it? You know, because we challenged at the time Mayor Prue, who did not fund the full ordinance, but the court ruled that by appropriation, the mayor did the correct thing. It was the mayor's choice as to not funding the amount of firefighters in a given year. And in respect to the issue of residency, I know other communities do adopt ordinances, but we can't use an ordinance to supersede or to negotiate ourselves. So it's kind of a...
I understand that, but the question is then, if it is an ordinance and it is a local law, does the contract negotiation need to occur within that, or can a negotiated contract overrule a law? And a contract is negotiated through the executive branch. Law is created in our branch. And I just think we do need to have clarity on it, because on the one hand, whether you agree or disagree, we have a law on the books. So the question is it enforceable or is it not?
No, it's collective bargaining.
But, you know,
I understand.
that's my
Definitely
question,
understand.
whether...
And we've just, the law department's going to get us an opinion on that. Do you want that opinion before we vote on this tomorrow evening, or you just want that to be clarified once and for all?
I would like the opinion before we vote, because we've discussed this over the last year.
Crystal, is that possible? Yes, I can provide a written opinion. Okay, thank you.
Because, I mean, you know, we need to be informed if there's no point in having an ordinance because it doesn't mean anything. Or on the other hand,
No,
it should.
it's a fair request, and the law department's going to provide us an opinion.
Thank you.
We have to be careful, we can't negotiate this contract.
Correct.
That seems like we're kind of
It's,
close to it.
it's an ordinance on our, it's a
Collective
local
bargaining,
law.
though. It's a local law, but it's a collective
Can I speak on this real quick?
supersedes it.
If you could wait 1 second, Will, Counselor Sullivan's been very patient. I think it's on this.
Just to Counselor Vacan's question here, over a year ago, I did file an order, and it's never come out of committee, it's stuck somewhere, maybe we should check with Ryan, about using city ordinances as bargaining chips in contract negotiations. So that is out there somewhere, we just have to find it again, and I like the idea, we bring it up. The order's already filed.
Okay. Just let us know when the visitation days are. We will come to see you. Will?
In the past 3 months, you've had other associations, maybe other unions in here. One particular is part of this fire, and this was never a topic. You had multiple months to find the answer for this. I just don't understand why it's coming up tonight.
It's a fair question.
It is, I respect it, but,
It's
I mean,
language.
I don't want to
within-
tie up our contract. That's,
Language within the two-page, agreement right here. And just anything, as I stated earlier, can be discussed this evening. We're voting on an appropriation. Okay, Council Leahy's correct, we're not negotiating. Council Bacon's correct in the ordinance that was passed. The opinion, will give us the answer. Doesn't mean we cannot vote tomorrow evening, but each individual councilor is going to make their own mind tomorrow evening if they're prepared to vote. So the more answers we get, the better we can put this to a vote tomorrow evening. And that's the only reason. But we're not going to negotiate it. But I'll stop there. Anything else? Any other
I make a motion to approve it.
motion on the floor is seconded?
Second.
To adopt and to recommend to the full city council that the free cash total of $403,804.41 be used to pay for the salary increases for the remainder of this fiscal year and for the retroactive pay for any of the salaries associated with this said agreement. The chair notes that the full city council will be meeting tomorrow evening, and if this is adopted by the full city council, then this contract will be ratified. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item number 3, I would suggest
you.
that we just say the order's been complied with, and I will keep a copy for the archives of the Finance Committee.
You guys are good. Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Item
All
3,
those in
comply
favor?
with, aye.
Be safe.
Any opposed? So moved. Tanya, while you're sitting there, if we can do item number 2 real quick. I thought we already did this, but I think we couldn't quite get through it at our last meeting. We took it up. This is the $127,000, oh wow, $127.
That mistake,
It's getting
alright.
contagious. Be authorized from the mayor's auditor's department, city liability damage insurance appropriation for fiscal year 2019. This would be a two-pronged vote for services rendered in fiscal year 2018 that were unencumbered, and for what it's using this year's monies to pay for the bill from last year. Can you just run through us? I got it in front of me, but what the
Yeah.
bill is?
So it's $127, and what they consider it is a true-up. So that means that the commercial, and I'm not familiar with this, I did have to go through the insurance company. What they do is at the beginning of the year, they take an inventory of all of our assets, all of our equipment, and they give us the invoice based on that number. Throughout the year, we can add and subtract vehicles as necessary, and at the end of the year, they do a true-up, and they either refund us for what we don't cover, or they charge us for what we didn't. In this particular case, the $127 was for trucks. I think I put that information in there.
This is housekeeping, right? We do this every year.
I actually asked them to do their true-up early next year, so that way we can at least encumber for it.
Right. Good point.
And that way I don't have to, but I mean, we do have to pay it, so.
Right.
Okay. So it's insurance premium owed that we were unaware of last year, because I never heard the term, true up.
It's a true-up, and I never did either. I've never heard of that type of a auto policy. It does make sense, though, because throughout the year, I mean, you're adding, you're subtracting, and it's probably a lot for any insurance company, and even us to keep track of, so it works out nicely, but we can do it earlier. We could do the true-up before, before the budget year.
Word of the day, true up.
True-up.
True up.
I was like, what's a true-up?
Google that word. All right, any questions?
No, I make a motion that we pay the
Second.
bill, true up bill,
Motion made and seconded
$127.
to recommend the city council that we pay the bill, both with money from this year for the bill from last year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, Tanya. I know you're sticking around, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted me to stay here while you went through.
You're
Fair
comfortable. If you're comfortable, if you want to go back with those lawyers, be careful.
Listen, it doesn't matter to me.
We have with
Chart
us
take
the
back there.
superintendent of the
Oh,
DPW
Jinda's
and
here.
our city engineer. I proudly said, since Terry Murphy first served
Here's
on
the-
the city
one of
council
these.
many moons ago, This is the first time we have two actual engineers that come to our meetings, which is, I think, a plus for a lot of the work that we do in this, this department. This is for item number 4, as we're getting information passed out. Item number 4 is an order that the sum of $8,906,000 be appropriated to pay the cost of the Jackson Street area sewer separation project. Payment of cost shall be related hereto, and that is to meet the appropriation of the treasurer with the approval of the mayor is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 7, Section 1 of the general laws and pursuant to any other enabling authority to issue bonds or notes of the city, therefore, and the mayor is authorized to contract for and expend state aid available for the project, and that the mayor is authorized to take any other action necessary to carry out this project. That's the gist of what's before us this evening. Chair will entertain a motion to take off the table for discussion.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Welcome, gentlemen. I know this is a project, I think it's the first major project since we did the Berkshire separation project, but if you could run us through this, and then we can get into some questions and answers and talk about both the project and about the funding of the project.
Okay, short project description. I handed out the small packet. The first page shows the geographical limits of the project. It's basically from Ray Street all the way down to the third level canal, and then heading to the east and the west to the South Canal Street and to Cabot Street. What the project consists of is taking the city's sewers in that location, which are combined sewers, which means rainwater and sanitary sewage flows through the same pipe, and creating two piping systems and sending those two piping systems separately to the pumping station and to the river. So the rainwater, the storm drainage will now be directed to go only to the river. The sanitary sewage will be directed to go to the Jackson Street pumping station. Pretty major impact to this portion of the city. It'll basically impact all the alleys, because traditionally all the sewer lines will run down the alleys, as well as some of the main lines will run down the main streets. But when it's all said and done, we'll now have a parallel piping system with the rainwater and the sanitary sewage separate and going where it should go.
Can I ask a question?
Councilor Leahy?
Yeah, thank you. Now, why is this coming before us now? I thought back in 2001, 2002, when we were doing the combined sewer overflow with Aquarian or United Water or whatever name their company is today, Suez. How come that wasn't part of the bond then?
So that project was the Berkshire Street treatment facility. That's just one of the many projects that are in the city for elimination of CSOs.
So it's a good intro to the second sheet here. The second sheet tabulates, based on a study that was done in the year 2000, the combined sewer overflows that still existed in the city at that time. And you can see from this tabulation that you mentioned the Berkshire Street treatment facility, that handles the biggest piece of the overflows, but does not handle the entirety of the overflows. There's 44% of the volume on an annual basis that goes to other locations. It's worth noting, for what it's worth, that even the Berkshire Street treatment facility, what it does is it screens the combined sewage and it disinfects the combined sewage. We still have combined sewer overflows through the Berkshire facility, but what goes to the river is in much better shape than used to go to the river, which was untreated, unscreened, undisinfected.
But even the Berkshire Street treatment facility has a bypass.
Right.
So while it does do limited treatment with the screening and disinfection, there is the possibility of that being bypassed and raw sewage going to the Connecticut River under extreme conditions.
So would Aquarian or United Water or that company, Suez, be responsible for building this and maintaining this?
They operate the Berkshire Street treatment facility on behalf of the city. What about this project? No, they wouldn't, because it wasn't part of the constructed works at the time of the original contract.
I guess that's my question. How come it wasn't?
It wasn't because at the time the requirement that the EPA and DEP had on the city was to build the Berkshire Street treatment facility.
So this is another unfunded mandate?
And there's many more to come.
There are.
There are more.
The ultimate goal of eliminating all untreated wastewater going to the river is going to be many years and many dollars down the road. This is the next step in that
The
process.
Berkshire project, I think, was, of the total problem, I think, to Councilor Leahy's question, the Berkshire answer was about 45–50% of what we actually have to do. And it was, the reason was affordability, that the city stopped there. And the reason was that the government, I'm sorry, the federal government was satisfied enough to get us off the radar of fines and so forth. But these plans have been in the works ever since we did the Berkshire project. And I think that's a good question to remind all of us that Berkshire project, as big as it was less than 50% of our problem.
And while
Go ahead.
And while the Berkshire Street project met the requirements at that time, we're now 10+ years later, and they've come back with more requirements. And their additional requirements are this Jackson Street project, and then also finalizing that 2000 draft long-term control plan, which was the initial draft roadmap for the city in eliminating our combined sewer overflows. So now they want us to move that from draft into final. And once it is final, that'll be the long-term roadmap for the next 20+ years on a phased approach at eliminating all of our combined sewer overflows.
It's worth saying the regulations haven't changed. The regulations are the same that they were 15 years ago. The state and the federal government has allowed the city time to come into compliance with those regulations, and it continues to allow the city time to come in compliance with the regulations. So the regulations haven't changed. It's really the next step in complying.
And while we've had administrative orders, there's two different levels. There's administrative orders and then the consent decrees. The consent decrees are where you get into fines and penalties and damages for violating the Clean Water Act. So far, the city has been able to stay within the realm of administrative orders that are outside of those fines and penalties. And I think as long as we continue on the path that we're on, we might be able to stay in the administrative order realm and not get into the fines and damages.
Since the original Berkshire project, nothing was separated. We treated it all together, correct? When it gets to Berkshire Street, sewer and stormwater still goes together.
Correct. The Berkshire Street didn't provide any separation.
Right.
It was just a larger treatment plant for the combined wastewater that came to the plant. There have been two separation projects that have happened.
Correct. But let me, Mike, if I can just get to my question, and thank you, but not to interrupt you, but this will be the first time stormwater separated, as the mandate says we have to do it, will be going untreated into the river?
No, there have, as Mike had referenced, there have been two prior separation projects, and by virtue of separating.
And we have stormwater going
have
into the river
stormwater.
right now?
Correct, yes.
So once it's separated, the sewage will go to the Jackson Street pump, which will bring it to the treatment plant?
Correct.
Okay. The stormwater will go into the river. Where are we standing with the talk about the law changing to where the stormwater is eventually going to have to be treated?
You're correct in that there is a regulation that applies to stormwater. The approach that's been taken to date and is likely going to be taken for the foreseeable future is the city is required to implement best management practices, which practices intended to clean up the stormwater as much as you can before it goes into the river. So as a requirement, for instance, catch basins now need to be cleaned before they're 50% full so they don't discharge sediment out of the catch basin. Streets need to be swept. Now, some streets twice per year versus just one time per year. So the strategy that the regulations that cover stormwater focus on is the management practices, ultimately with the goal of hopefully communities never having to treat stormwater because they're doing a better job cleaning it up before it gets into the piping system and goes to the river. So could that happen somewhere down the road, but it's nowhere in the near future.
And by redirecting stormwater as we go, will that lessen the demand on the wastewater treatment plant and on the sewer overflow, combined sewer overflow?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It'll reduce the peak flows to the treatment plant when it rains, and it'll also reduce the likelihood of overflows within the system and also overflows at the Berkshire Street facility.
And is that taken into consideration with the contract that we have with Suez? It's still Suez, or is it?
It is Suez, yeah. Yes, because there's a set cost that we pay, but then there's a variable cost, and the variable cost is based on flows and loads to the treatment plant.
So this could actually have probably small, but a good impact on the annual budget with Suez.
It could, yeah, but it would be relatively small.
Yeah. But eventually, it's what we want to do, or what we
Right,
are mandated to do.
and it'll also keep the federal government from imposing fines.
But they're closed now.
Right. Yep.
A little bit.
Sorry. Before we get into bonding, is there any questions on the project itself?
It's the time completion. How long would it take?
Good intro to the last page.
I'm working with you here.
So last page points some key milestones in the project. Where we stand right now is, as the chair knows, I believe, we were placed in what's known as the draft intended use plan. We applied for financing through the Mass State Revolving Loan Fund, which is a 2% interest fund, a reduced interest loan fund that'll save about 30% of the cost of financing this project over 20 years. We were put on that draft list on December 21st. The final list will be issued typically in 30 to 45 days after the draft list is out, because there's a public comment period that the state has to go through. Projects have never been taken off the draft list. They've only been added to the draft in between the draft and the final. So we are on the list, and we will stay on that list. The next step is to appropriate funds. After that, there's something known as a loan application that has to be put together, which is a fairly complicated process in that we need to put things together, such as all the permits related to the project. We need to work with the city solicitor to certify to title, basically certify that the city either owns the land or owns the right to work on the land that the project is going to be done on, and a number of other types of items that have to be part of that process. Number of different steps there. Many of them are financial. We're bringing the new city auditor up to speed in terms of the financial steps that have to be followed. This is typically a 9 to 12 month process to get through this. We have to do it in 6 months because we have the deadline in our EPA administrative orders to have this project under construction by June 30th. It's doable, but it means we're moving things forward fairly quickly, as the council is. Many communities wait 3 or 4 or 5 months after they get placed on a list to consider funding the project. You're considering, within days of being placed on the list, funding the project. So I think you've taken the appropriate step to try to move this forward as fast as you can. Ultimately, we have to begin construction by June 30th, and we have to, of 2019, and we have to have the project completed 18 months later.
Is it substantial completion or
it's defined as completion. The level of completion really isn't defined. But many times you complete a project and you still have to plant grass and you have to do other types of things. And
Ancillary things.
I expect there's flexibility there, but the project has to be completed and working by December 31st of 2000.
Yeah, pipes in the
2020.
Of 2020.
Correct. I will note a couple of items, as I mentioned previously. The cost savings of a 2% loan versus a 5% loan, which is likely where we're going to be at the time that this project would be financed, is about a 30% savings in overall financing costs. The city will also qualify for an additional grant amount based on affordability. It's referred to as principal forgiveness, and what the state does now is they take a certain amount of money and they tier that money with the least the communities with the lowest affordability getting the highest percentage of those monies. As an example, the city of Brockton last year would be in that same category as the city of Holyoke. They received over a 10% principal forgiveness on a project that they're working on last year. So what happens is the state waits until all the projects actually get to the point that they're all filed and they're all under construction. Then they know how much money they have to spend, and then they figure out how the money can get distributed with the lowest median household income communities getting the highest percentage of money, and working all the way around to communities that are over the median household income getting no money at the top tier. But if
The good news for this is we are the lowest.
I do understand, yes. So I can't guarantee it, but if the past is anything like, the future is anything like the past, we may be looking at an additional savings of 10% off that, which means instead of being an $8.9 million loan, it would be roughly an $8 million loan. And that amount gets figured out once you go from short-term financing, which is carried by operating costs, to long-term financing, which is ultimately the bond amount. But we don't know that at this point.
As we get into the bonding, any more questions on the project?
Yeah,
But Councilor Tallman.
yeah,
and
just had
Councilor Bacon.
just quick question. On the loan interest, you said you're pretty sure that you'll get the 2% as of right now? So
That
that's
is the program. That is, it's a standard
standard, okay.
2% reduced interest, yes.
Yeah, because I think years ago when we did the plant, I think that's what it was 2 and 2.5% loan at the time, that the government. Is there any, I mean, funds that possibly the federal government or state government might come down the road to help this, it could be done to help this project?
Certainly there's a move afoot, particularly with Richard Neal moving into House Ways and Means Committee chairmanship. And in fact, I know Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is already working with Holyoke, Chicopee, and Springfield Water and Sewer Commission to author a letter to go to the representative to highlight the need for this project, since he's going to be in a much more positive position. There might be. We also currently qualify, as you may know, through the Connecticut River Cleanup Committee for funding that's distributed from the state level, and that's awarded on an annual basis. So we may qualify for some funding there as well. But there's a move afoot to try to reach directly out to the federal government to see if there's a way to obtain additional funding to help the three communities or the three entities.
Thank you.
Councilor Bacon and Councilor Sullivan.
Thanks. I was just quickly looking at the spreadsheet, and it looks like once we fund this project, if I'm doing my quick math correctly, that we would be at around 66% of reducing the overflow with everything that's been done so far, and adding this to it. Does that sound right?
I haven't added those numbers up, but I think you're close. Because
Just
I think,
quick,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
mean, so we're at least well over the 50% threshold.
Definitely.
And Mike had said that we're out of danger at the moment of getting into the fine and penalties situation. Is there kind of a magic number? Are they looking for like 70% by the end of X year or some such thing when they're making these decisions?
I think they're looking to see progress.
Yeah.
And I believe, I know, because I did actually hear from one of the folks at EPA that they were pleased to see that the city was moving forward with the rate increase, because unfortunately they go hand in hand. If you can't fund your system properly, you can't maintain your system properly, you can't upgrade your system properly. So they saw that as an overall positive step towards bringing the city into compliance.
Thank you.
One thing to note on the spreadsheet is that the dollar amounts are based on that 2000 draft long-term control plan, and they have not been escalated to today's dollars or into the future when these projects might be constructed, if they are constructed.
That plan is being updated. That's one of the requirements the city has, and it'll be completed, I believe, December of 2020. If I recall correctly.
Yeah.
We have one additional year. The purpose of that is to come up with, are there any better or any more cost-effective ways to do what has to be done, and to put costs and schedules on that. And then ultimately, the city's going to be expected to live by that schedule that's ultimately proposed to EPA for approval.
So one example of that is the second line on that spreadsheet is the Highland Park Treatment Facility. So this long-term control plan would look at that and see, is it cost-effective to have a second Berkshire Street-style treatment plant within the city system, or would it be more cost-effective to separate those combined sewers and, you know, have the stormwater go to the river and the sewage go to the treatment plant?
Councilor Sullivan and Councilor Murphy.
Just to revisit the administrative thing versus the consent thing, if we don't move expeditiously on this, what kind of fines are they talking about?
Oh, I forget the language, but is it $1,500 per occurrence?
The Clean Water Act itself has a $27,500 penalty built into the Clean Water Act for permit violations. Those are rarely assessed to the big hammer that's necessary, but that's what EPA could assess if the city decided today, no, we're not going to do anything, we're going to tell the federal government to go to hell.
$27,500 per day.
Per violation.
That's what I wanted to.
Statutorily, that's the penalty they could assess.
Right.
Well, per violation.
Correct.
So on a dry day, we don't have sewer overflows, we wouldn't get fined. On a moderately wet day, we do have sewer overflows, and we would get fined.
That's it.
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, just to, first of all, obviously it's things we have to do. We don't have a choice, and that was even back in my day. We were starting to get pressured about that. So, but I'm looking at the map, and I think I heard you say most of the work will be done in the alleys?
The majority of the work will happen in the alleys because when the sewer system was built back in the 1890s, and we're dealing with infrastructure that is that old, most of it was constructed in the alleys between buildings. The drinking water infrastructure was typically in the streets, and the sewers were in the back alleys.
Okay. So when the project is done, is there going to be a physical structure somewhere? Or is there like a pumping station that's going to be like sticking out? This is a pumping station for this, or is it going to be all underground?
So the Jackson Street pump station already exists. It's
Okay.
near the Sunoco facility.
Okay. So you're just putting it right inside there?
We're going to reuse that existing pump station. That pump station stays. What we're doing is constructing a new pipe dedicated for the sewage, and it's still going to go to that pump station.
Okay. And
the dedicated pipe for the stormwater will go out to the river.
Okay.
So there's no structures. Bob, as you and Bob said, the work is in the alleys.
Yep.
So when the project's done, the alleys will be restored. They'll be in a lot better condition than they are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the alleys have never been good in my lifetime, I can tell you that. But just one other thing about that. So as you're going, I know you said you have to start this by July 1st, right?
Correct.
So am I correct in assuming that some of these alleys will start to be getting dug up in July, or?
I wouldn't think July, but probably in the summer at some point. We do know that we need to do a lot of community outreach as well, and we're sort of checking off the boxes as we go right now. Funding is important, permits are important, title's important, and then a month or two or more before we get under construction, starting to reach out to the community so they understand what's going to be going on.
Okay. And do you have any idea which alleys you would be starting with? Is it like you're working your way from Race Street down, or will you work your way from Canal Street up?
Generally, unless there's a reason to do it otherwise, it's best to leave the sequence of work up to the contractor. They control the means and method. They control how many crews. They control where the crews go. If there was a constraint that something could only be done a certain time of year, we would specify schedule. But that isn't the case in this project. So it's really, project's going to go out to bid, the contractor's going to be hired. Contractor will then present a schedule to the city for review.
But generally, sewers and storm drains would be constructed on the downstream end, moving upstream. So
To my non-technical mind, tell me which way that is.
starting at the bottom of the page,
Yeah?
and then moving up and out.
Okay.
But there may be multiple crews, and it could be anywhere from 1 crew to 4 crews in the city on one day. Wouldn't surprise me.
And we're not replacing 100% of the infrastructure. There will be some infrastructure that remains.
Generally, one pipe will stay. If it's in, every pipe's been inspected, every pipe is cambered. Some pipes need to be lined. Some are perfectly fine the way they are, so they can stay the way they are, as long as we add a second pipe to carry the other flow.
Thanks.
I think Councilor Murphy now represents the neighborhood, so I think he's the key in keeping them updated. There's also a South Holyoke Neighborhood Association, which I think would be preliminary, good to give them a heads up so they can start talking about it. But there's people who park their cars in garages that are in the alleyways, businesses to think about, and I'm sure you're well aware of it. And the earlier the notification, I think the better off, the less hassles we'll hear. Right there?
We would hope.
I have a question for the auditor, if there's questions that are pretty much good for the project. Tanya, I'm not sure if you can answer this. The sewer treatment plant is a user fee operation. The bond will be paid out of the user fee, Michael, right?
Correct.
It's also an enterprise, the only enterprise funding separate entity that we have within the city itself, which connects it to the budget, directly to the city budget. This bonding, will this be considered separate in terms of, it'll still be part of the city's overall rating, but will it be considered separate because the revenue to pay for the bonding is the user fee itself?
You're right, I'm not really sure of that answer.
Okay.
I would say it would still be a part of our bonding process, because even though it's through the state, it's still going to be a debt that we incur.
Correct. But there is, and we just did this with the water department, and I forgot the terminology. But if you or I and you could contact Sandy tomorrow, and this language was done by bond counsel, it looks like it.
It will be, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. It's,
I can
I think
definitely.
it's a quick answer, but I think we just have to be able to state it tomorrow night, to be, confident about it tomorrow night.
And to that question, the bond itself will be issued by an entity known as the Massachusetts Water Pollution Abatement Trust. They, every year, package multiple projects from multiple communities together and sell bonds to the market, and as a result of that, get the advantageous rates as well.
Okay.
It won't be issued by the
But
city.
we would control when, when the bond would,
Yes.
the amount of the bond and when the bond would take place.
The process is that the project works under short-term financing. That is actually short-term financing provided by the Water Pollution Abatement Trust as well, typically at very low interest, about 0.5%, 0.75%, like a construction loan. You just pay for what you draw down. When the project is complete, when the final project cost is known, then that gets rolled into the long-term financing. And that gets issued by the state whenever the state decides to issue bonds, because there's reasons why they issue bonds certain times of the year, certain numbers of projects put together. They control that process.
Could I have the name again?
Massachusetts Water Pollution Abatement Trust.
Thank you.
And I have it in the last sheet where we talk about some of the steps, because there are some documents and processes that particularly the city auditor will be working with them on.
And the intent is for the sewer fund to pay the loan and interest, the principal and interest on the loan.
Okay.
Joe, could I just ask?
Councilor Murphy?
So just again, with the sewer fund paying for that on a yearly basis, how much is this adding to that expense? Approximately. We talking 500,000, a million?
In the $400,000 to $500,000 range.
So on top of the sewer fee that was just put in
Correct.
to establish somewhat a balanced operation, this would be an additional expense adding on after that.
Correct. Which would most likely start in 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Very good.
It is what it is, right?
It is. Pay me now, pay me later. Chair will entertain a motion.
A motion that the sum of $8,906,000 be appropriated for the Jackson Street sewer separation project.
Second it.
On that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. We're going to recommend it to the full city council tomorrow evening. If you can get that answer, I'll try and talk to Sandy and maybe we can get a hold of, I don't know, would Cinder be involved with this?
I know the mayor and I have been talking to Cinder about the bond rating and how we could actually have a better bond rating, so we could always send her an email. She's pretty quick to reply, so I can just document it and send it to Sandy and Cinder and see what they say. I'm sure they'll answer tomorrow, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I think, Mike, you're up for the next one, too. Chair will entertain a motion to take up item number 5.
So moved.
DPW police mechanic, this would be the $19,500 line item, be transferred into a police motor vehicle repairs, same amount, $19,500. Request comes, signed off by Mike McManus and the mayor, and the request comes to us. Mike?
So at the beginning of this fiscal year, there was a new position that was created, which was the police mechanic. We haven't filled that yet. We've interviewed, and we're in the hiring process right now, but we've been through half a fiscal year without that mechanic. The police department still has their maintenance needs. DPW and the police department have been doing their best to meet those vehicle maintenance needs, but there are times when vehicles have to go out to Marquette for repairs. The police department has a line item in their budget for those repairs, but we've gone over that line item, and this transfer is approximately half a year's salary for that DPW, or no, the police mechanic, to go into the vehicle maintenance fund on the police side.
Just ask a question.
Councilor Lahey?
Actually, so tonight, when we, actually, I should say tomorrow night, with everything that we approved tonight financially, where would that put us for free cash?
With everything that has been approved, so
Hypothetically, everything goes through tomorrow night.
we would have 171,900 available, but just so you also know, there's another contract out there, the NAGE contract, which also is $50,000 that we wanted to put in for free cash as well, which would leave us with 123,500.
And if it snows,
Yeah, I was
if it snows,
Somebody better get out some shovels.
We don't pay for it
Jeepers.
later.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, Joe.
no, that's fine. I had 170, thank you, 'cause I just made 171.
We still have, yeah, we've hardly touched it.
Okay, Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just a quick question. On that funding, will that take them to the end of the year? That amount, or is it just sort of gapping for now, or?
It's
Because you still got till
gapping.
June, right?
It's hard to tell
Hard
what's
to
going to
tell.
happen between now and June, but it'll get us closer, yeah. And I'm not sure exactly where we are on the police vehicle expense.
Right. Is anybody, other than anybody helping out, I mean, in your department at all, trying to help with some of the expenses that, so the cars don't have to get sent out, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so yours, okay, so
There
there's
is.
somebody
Right.
helping.
And the police, too. The police have been doing maintenance work on their vehicles, and then, you know, they are helping as well.
Right, and so this money transferred, if you said you're in the hiring process, if you hire somebody in February, there'll still be money in that account,
Yes,
because it's from last year, from July to December.
correct,
So there'll still be money to pay him for the remainder of the fiscal year.
correct.
And you feel good, you feel confident that you'll be hiring somebody soon?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
Make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Motion made second to adopt and recommend the full city council tomorrow evening to approve this transfer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Next item is a little unique. And it's item number 6. Chair will entertain a motion to take off the table.
So moved.
This is the last item?
There's actually 2,
more.
but this is going to be quick, I think. This, I'm going to read it, and then Tanya and I are going to explain it, because the people who we really need here are not here. But that the following amounts are hereby appropriated as an amendment to the budget for fiscal year 2019. That's July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019, to be expended by the departments for purposes specified. Then we have a series of items which go from retired teachers' health insurance, air pollution, RMV, non-renewable surcharge, regional transit, special ed, school choice sending tuition, charter schools sending tuition. This is a budget amendment. And Tanya, if I say anything wrong, just correct me, or I might even just pass the baton to you. But I was very, when I first saw it came in, I was very concerned that the mayor was filing a new budget on us, or new budget items on us. Actually, this is in the cherry sheet now as a lump sum with some corrections that are taking place. And I think most of us recognize this is just about all school department, that school spending items.
And actually, after we had a conversation today, not to interrupt you, but
Actually, take over.
okay, well.
They'd rather hear from you than me.
After I had the conversation with you, I did a little research on how to explain it, so that way it's more understandable. So the reality of it is in the state budget, these are all separate programs. And in the school department, they have them all as separate budget items, but in the city, we do not. So this money is already in the city budget. It's in Munis under its own account numbers, but it's not separated out by individual items, if that makes sense. It's straight out. I brought the city budget, so if you want to take a look at it, because you can see here, we just have personal services and expenses and capital outlays for the school. What we need this to say is this stuff for the school department, so that way we can appropriate and also track in the way that the government, the Department of Revenue wants us to track it.
So this is housekeeping for you?
Yes,
Not just-
housekeeping,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
is.
Not
And
just
it is state, I mean, it is a state, we should have been doing it, but unless you actually had an issue with your assessment, you would probably never not know that, so. So that's all this is, if that makes sense.
So it is what it is.
Does make sense.
We actually
I try.
It does.
We actually were updated by Anthony Soto on numerous occasions, and he did bring it to our attention, some of those changes, especially the charter school changes. And then we did have one adjustment last year, but we learned more about charter school in the last 2 years, I think, than
He's good.
we've ever known,
Right.
and we appreciate the transparency from the school department. Tanya, I don't know I don't think it matters as far as this vote goes, but I do know they were talking about bringing those charter school expenses into their budget. I take it they haven't done that, if it's still in the cherry sheet in this form?
I think it's separated in the school department's budget, but not in the city's budget.
Okay.
So,
But by that I mean it's still net school spending.
it's still, I don't think they consider it net school spending, and that's the problem. And so, say if your assessment says you have more kids going into charter school, so you have, say, $100,000 as an example, but then all those kids end up in the public school system, your assessment is off. But you can't just take that money and put it into your net school spending, because this is a state program. It has to go, I believe it has to go through city council. So on the school side, it's okay, but on the city side, we can't just change that money to where we want to spend it.
Yep.
It has to all be the same as the school department.
Right.
And I can't see what's in the school budget, so I can't tell you for sure. But I did also have a conversation with Anthony Soto. That's what I got out of it.
Okay, so Anthony is aware of this request.
Yes.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, could you tell me just, what is an RMV non-renewal surcharge?
registry of motor vehicle surcharge.
Non-renewal.
I honestly am not that familiar with
Like a
it.
ticket, maybe.
It's a $100,000 ticket.
Yeah. It's a lot of money.
And what you do is it's an assessment by the state. So 3 times a year, you go in and you look at the Cherry Street, and it will say Holyoke, and it will tell you how much money that you're going to get, or that you.
I wonder if it's something to do with busing and the state inspecting it, or
There is a regional transit as well, if that's what you're talking about. That's separate.
A non-renewal surcharge?
let me ask you this: can we table this and have Anthony come in?
That is actually part of the city. The school department is the teacher's health insurance, special education, and school choice and charter school sending tuition.
Great, that's a big question, Michael.
I mean, yeah, I mean, all the rest of it says education, tuition,
Is this something we
education,
need to pass
tuition.
tonight?
No,
No.
no. But I mean, obviously in next year's budget, we would want that. Because that is one of the things that the Department of Revenue forgave us for. Because we did stick it into the net school spending based on information provided by the Department of Education, who would not have known we didn't have it separate in our budget at all.
It seems like you're on top of things, and I like that.
I'm trying.
And it shows.
Thank you.
Joe.
Councilor Bacon.
I was just going to suggest, I don't see any harm in breaking it out. It doesn't stop us from asking questions about the accounts we're not familiar with.
That's fine, that's true.
Absolutely.
We're not appropriating money with this vote.
No, we're not.
No.
We are just
It's already there.
separating. The money's already there.
This money is already in the school expense line, but it's just not separate.
We can still ask.
Yeah, no, that's
can,
like, yeah,
please,
you're a good point,
please.
excellent point.
Yeah.
So I make a motion to approve it?
I'll second.
Motion made second to approve. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. The final order for this evening is intended to be at least a preliminary discussion. I'd hoped the mayor would be here, especially for this one, but for a number of items this evening. But unfortunately, he did let me know he's under the weather. He did fall ill and could not make it. But I think just for the purpose of taking it up and maybe talking to Councilor Bacon, it's her order, but it certainly is something of worthy proposal, because we originally heard it from Senator McNeary when she was with us earlier this year, or late last year. I'll take it off the table for discussion. All those in order, so moved. That the following actions take place to strengthen our financial condition of our city for recommendations by our financial advisor, Senator McNeary. The Debt Management Stabilization Fund be established. The financial plan be improved for the purpose of the financial plan to improve the bond rating from A+ to AA, and the minimum of 10% of the budget be maintained in the stabilization fund with the goal of increasing the fund to 15% of the budget prior to the fund being used from the fund and other emergency purposes. Linda, do you want to? I think we all remember, or I hope most of us remember, but the discussion we had with Cinder on this when we were talking last year. And if you want to run, I know you filed this. If you'd like to, as the maker of the order, run through it real quick.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that we kept before us some of what I saw as the core issues that she had raised in her presentation. And this wasn't the first time that we had been given this information. I think over time we get these lengthy reports that only a few of us find somewhat entertaining, and most of us it would put to sleep. However, I think that without paying attention, and I picked out the 3 that I thought were the most key to the long-term stability, or gaining, I should say, stability in the city, because I see us in a very unstable financial condition in the city. So I chose the top 3 that I thought would make the biggest difference. And I'm certainly open to feedback from the auditor, the mayor, or anybody else if you're looking through her report and her remarks and you find something that you think should replace one or be added to it. But those, for me, were the top 3. I think we had become mistakenly happy with our stabilization fund, thinking that it was really, really big. and that we could start spending some of it. And I think that was just a mistaken perception because it is getting bigger. Unfortunately, our budget's getting bigger as a percentage more rapidly than the stabilization fund. So I think these are things that it's easy to lose sight of because we tend to look at things at one at a time instead of the big picture. So that's really simply where I'm coming from on it. I think she surprised some of us in the room when she said that, you know, A+, while it's okay, isn't even in the field with the rest of the communities that enjoy a good rating, and that we need to actually improve that. Because we were all feeling pretty good. Hey, we got out of the B's into the A's, right? But it's all relative. A is not always an A. Sometimes you need a double A. And so I think that was a little bit eye-opening for those of us who don't tend to think along that kind of a grading system for bonds. And so it's not really within our purview as city councilors to do the plan, but I think it is certainly our responsibility, working jointly with the executive branch, to try to do things policy-wise that make the boat go in the right way.
Absolutely. And I have to agree with you when you say, like, you're looking at things like $2 million here and $4 million there, but you still have bonds from 10 years ago.
Exactly.
And 15 years ago.
Exactly.
So I know I've been working with the mayor. We do have, like, what our capital debt is. We're putting it into a nice format that's actually readable within 5 years. We're working with Cinder. We're going to send her that. We also know that we have some upcoming projects that have been presented to the mayor. We do have it's a program that UMass set up to show, like, what it does is, and I'm not that familiar with it, but I did take I tried to take a good look at it. But what it does is it tells you as debt drops off, like, what you can do to increase your bond rating as you move forward with different projects. So it kind of helps you in the short term and then in the long term. But we also have to start looking at, like, what do we really need? Is it an emergency kind of thing?
Right, and the only other point that I would make is relative to the Debt Management Stabilization Fund, I really like the concept of having the one that is the truly emergency fund, and then the other that would tie in with that longer range plan.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Because I'm totally in favor of the bonding for the sewer overflow project. I mean, it's a must-do thing. Absolutely. But I think we could reasonably have debate and discussion about how to pay for that separately from the sewer rate, which, you know, I took a different position on that rate and doing it all at once because all at once isn't all at once, you know, in reality anyway. So people feel like, oh, the big hit once. Well, not really. And so I think we need a different kind of approach to debt.
Agreed.
Because I understand that back in whatever it was, 1970 or whatever, what was part of a city budget was made into an enterprise fund. And I kind of see the concept of it because the city's not all uniform, so I sort of get it. And while I'll argue vociferously against separate fees for stormwater, on the other hand, I might make the argument for infrastructure.
Correct.
That should properly be a citywide debt stabilization fund.
I agree with that.
Okay, so, so I think it sort of depends what the argument is, where I might fall down on it, but I think the reality of the CSO stuff is that we must do it. It is for the whole city. The whole city will be paying the fines if we don't achieve it, so I sort of frame that differently in my own mind. How we would achieve the mechanics of putting the money into that fund would have to go into the budget. And
yes,
all these contracts are coming in, $400,000 for one contract. Counselor Bartley was absolutely correct to raise the flag of caution on that. We already know the bonding that we've approved is going to add hundreds of thousands of dollars of expense to the budget.
You still, you'll have to pay for it on
You
an
have to
annual
pay
basis.
for those bonds, and that's not counting the carrying costs going forward of these contracts that are coming in. I mean, we're already in the red. I'm just doing the math in my head, looking at carrying costs. And every once in a while, somebody will ask you, can you tell us what the carrying cost on that bond is? But we really need to be thinking about what are the carrying costs of all the bonds?
Well, that's what
Because
we're
we're not thinking about that. And if we have a line in the budget where we can see it,
well, you will be because I have that for
okay.
you.
So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing on this.
Thank you.
And I've wanted you to be able to get your feet under you, but I'm planning, when I don't think it would kill you, to file an order to ask you to come in quarterly to update us on the status of accounts, bonding,
That's a good idea.
et cetera, et cetera. I didn't want to put that out there before you kind of got in.
That's absolutely
but
fine.
Is that, if that's a comfortable thing for you, I
think
would
it's a
like
good thing. I
that.
think I would want to know that if I was you.
Yeah, and I just think it helps us to keep in communication with you too.
Absolutely.
Because you're working during the day, we're working during the day, and it's like, it's just hard. So I will file that if that's something
Absolutely.
that you think is manageable.
And when I send out the budget reports on a monthly basis, if you look at something or you wanna like be able to understand something more, give me a call. Anytime. I mean, I know I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of counselors, but like if you have a question, just give me a call. I'm happy to talk about it.
And having said, having put out this order and put out these ideas, I really, beyond the sort of structure, I don't totally get how the money moves. So, I don't really have any strong or strict ideas about the how.
I can change that for you.
But just, for initial discussion.
Absolutely.
That's all.
I will not.
So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Top?
I just had a couple of comments. I think this is a great order, and to have you come in every quarterly, I think it'd be great to have that discussion to find out, what we can do to, because we just found out tonight, 121,000 after a couple, we got 5 months to go to the end of the fiscal year, so we have to do some things to really look at improving our financial condition, and I think the bond rating is a big thing too, because you really save some big money if you get to that next level, just that one next level. So I think this is great, and if we can find some money to sort of put into a separate fund like a stabilization for just things that come up, planning, capital planning or something. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's something we can look to plan in the years to come. As we get better financially, I think it's an improvement that we have to think of the taxpayers and how,
Absolutely.
all these increases are coming up for them, how we can manage our budget much better. So I really applaud my colleague to bring this forward and hope we can continue the discussion. It would have been nice for the mayor to be here for this, but I think maybe we can just maybe table this and to continue it. Okay.
If there's no other discussion, Councilor Murphy?
First of all, yeah, I think that just having listened for all these years of what's going on, obviously, we need to develop a better financial plan, no question about that. Obviously, to me, one of the things that we have to do, if I'm correct, and I know you'll correct me if I'm incorrect, we're at tax capacity. We're at budgeting our entire fund, which certainly does not. So obviously, we have to get some growth, and we have to really, if we can promote growth in some significant capacity, and then not spend all the money and start to create some tax flexibility, our bond rating would go up. Right. We'd also, and the other thing, and I know the goal is not to use the stabilization fund too often, if at all, but I think sometimes when we go to bond, we need to look at what we're paying on the bond insurance versus what we're making on the interest on the stabilization fund. And if one, by bonding, I end up paying more in interest than I would have collected in the stabilization fund, then I can improve my bond rating as long as I don't take the savings from not doing the bond and go spend it. So that's where the discipline comes, so that you get to the point where, yes, we're making, hey, I can spend $1 million and $200,000 in interest, or I can spend $1 million and $500,000 in interest, but I'll do the $1.2 million. I'm losing that stabilization fund, but I'm not going to spend that $1.5 million. So I can rebuild as I go along that stabilization fund and hopefully start to build some capacity. Because right now, we have no capacity. I know way back in my day when I used to teach at AIC and budgeting, and I mean, that was the bond rating kept saying, what's your capacity? What is your capacity to add on to it? And we are not very capable at this point. And just, you know, the ability to make wise decisions and not spend. When you make savings, don't try to spend it, save it, and put it again for another rainy day so that you can do the same thing again. So those are just I think it's certainly worth a significant long-term discussion.
Point well taken. With that in mind, I think the idea is to get the mayor and some other people in to discuss this. Sure. Motion to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Folks, thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned.
Excellent job. Good job.